Hey folks, and welcome to a new video. So I'm working on some software for a little while, and I want to show you guys about it. I want to yap about it a little bit, just cause. So this is the piece of software in question, rhai-console. This is a Rust crate that I just recently released 18 days ago, as of filming this video. So it's quite new. Hasn't really got a ton of usage, but I just want to show it off and just. I think it's cool and I think it's interesting. And I think it's kind of has a little bit of a paradigm in it that I don't believe is well served within the Rust world. So maybe a little bit of background as to what this thing is and why I built it. So first thing you can read here, it's an operational REPL and script runner based for embedding Rhai script into Rust applications. So what does that mean? Basically, it's the Rails console, but for Rust apps. So I personally have been a professional software developer for guts of kind of 15 years now, and one thing I spent a lot of time doing is I've actually spent a lot of time doing Ruby on Rails development. And if you don't know, with Ruby on Rails, Ruby is an interpreted language, so it has kind of an embedded REPL interface you can use. So you can use interactive Ruby console IRB in your terminal. You can do stuff with it. I can do it here. IRB. This opens up a REPL. So this is now REPL. REPL, if you don't know what it is, it's a read, evaluate, print loop. So you can kind of type anything you want in here, and it will execute it. That's not how you spell hello. Hello world. Oh, interesting. Yeah, hello world now. Yeah. And then you can do like 1 plus 1. What is 1 plus 1? It's 2. Great. So you can do stuff like this, and you can, assign variables. A equals 1 plus 1, and then A 2. Great. So you can do stuff. It's useful. Handy for doing like debugging stuff. If you need to just debug some code, you have a line of code, you're not exactly sure what that line of code does, you can throw it in here. You can mess with operations, and you can just test stuff out, which is a super useful thing to be able to do. If you have a Rails application, Rails comes packaged with the Rails console, which is basically kind of a prettied up REPL experience that specifically embeds your entire application logic into this. So you have all of your application code available in a REPL, and you can do stuff with it, which includes things like database access. You can access your database, you can insert records, you can change things, you can modify data as you see fit. And if you're in a professional Ruby on Rails environment, the Rails console becomes one of those super useful tools in production for debugging and all sorts of different things, fixing up data if you need to. Now, there is a natural evolution that as a Rails app gets bigger and bigger, that will tend to be locked down so that, not everyone can just YOLO onto a Rails console and modify data in production, because, that's kind of a vector that is open to making errors, and human error, that kind of thing, can creep in a lot. If you have been a Rails developer for years, you will probably know the gut-wrenching feeling of having hit enter on a command that has had some negative consequences to your application. So why would I want this for the Rust world? Well, in my current job, we had a situation recently. In my current role, it's basically a Python backend shop. Unfortunately, it doesn't use Django, which means that there isn't a Django Shell, which is kind of the Python Django equivalent of the Rails console. So we don't really have a good way of using our Python code to execute, to proxy things in the backend if we need to. So if we need to make database changes, things like that, we need to fix up data, we mostly have to manually write database scripts and that kind of stuff to do these changes. That isn't ideal, especially if you have very particular application logic in your code that then requires you to have validations in place or kind of things like that. Ideally, what you would want is anything that's accessing your data is actually being proxied through your application DB models. So in that situation, a console type environment is actually really preferable over directly modifying the database. And so a task that I had to do recently was, we have some complicated project stuff going on at the moment, which required or would facilitate having one of these consoles to be a really useful thing. So I went off in Python land and set up a prod REPL system using conch and a few other different bits of tooling. And as I was doing that, I got thinking about my favorite hobby programming language of Rust. And I realized that Rust doesn't really have the same equivalent. And this brought me back to my early days of my programming career, which was mostly in Java and C#. Again, compiled languages, they don't have REPLs, which is common. Mostly it's interpreted languages have REPLs. So in the Rust world, you don't have a REPL. You have a compiled binary that gets deployed onto a production server, and that's kind of it. So it's difficult to interact with your code to do stuff like operational tasks. And that's something that's, a really important thing to be able to do in a production system. So long story short, I'm coming around to the point of all this. I knew about Rhai. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Rhai, or HAI. It's basically an embedded scripting language that exists for Rust. One thing that's really cool about it, as opposed to just being a scripting layer that Rust can execute, it also has the ability that you can embed modules that you've written in Rust. You can expose them into the Rhai engine, and therefore you can write Rhai scripts that directly call your Rust application logic. So that is pretty cool, because that means that in theory we could probably spin up a Rhai REPL console that has access to our Rust application layer code, which means we could potentially have some sort of production console type environment for a Rust application that has access to all of our models. We can proxy all of our data access and stuff through our actual application logic and our models. But we also have the flexibility of doing it in a REPL environment or in a script type environment. And as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure this exists. People do this already. People are already using Rhai in their production applications to do scripting and stuff. But I think the packaged up version of it and the console type idea of it is something that I haven't actually seen. I don't know if it exists necessarily. So that's what I decided to build here. And that is what the rhai-console crate gives you. So if you want more details about this, about my rationale as to why I did this, I have a blog post that I've written here on my website. I'll link it in the description below, along with the link to the crate, so you can have a look. But let's actually do something with this. Let's use it, and let's talk about it a little bit as we go. So we can give a bit of a demo now about how it works, and you guys can have a look. So I've written this repo, which I'll link it below in the description. It's called Rhai Ops. So basically, this is just a toy app that you could run locally, and it'll just give you an idea about how Rhai works and how the operational scripting stuff can work. So it's a React front end and a really basic back end that talks to a SQLite DB. Very simple stuff. All the code's in here. I'm not going to open up any of this to show you it, just because it's really basic. You can go and have a look on Git if you would like to see what's in there. But I can show you the interface for it. Very simple. So it's sort of the e-commerce type maybe platform, has products and orders and stuff like that. So we've got a bunch of products in here. You can see the stuff in here. We've got orders. So you can see we've got our orders. They've got a status, they have IDs, they have totals, and various other bits of information. So if you imagine if you have a system like this, sometimes in order to do admin type tasks, you'll write an admin panel that will be some UI that someone can click through and do stuff. But sometimes admin tasks can be kind of very ad hoc, and you might not necessarily want or have the time to create a dedicated admin panel for that one task that you may never run again. So in that kind of situation, being able to do something operationally in the back end is quite a useful thing to have, especially if you need to do something quick and dirty, or if you need to write something like a custom script that can pull together some stuff you need. So that's where you might want to jump into your terminal. So again, I've just showed this data. You can see some stuff in here. That's all I wanted to show about it. You can do some stuff with it. So if we go into our terminal now, so running this locally, I have this all just running in Docker. So the command to open the rhai-console is a Docker command. So we're just going to exec into the app that's running, and we're going to run this binary. So let's do that. Let's go Docker compose exec app rhai -ops -REPL. And there we go. Okay, we're in our REPL console now. So this is just you can execute any Rhai code in here, and it will just REPL through it the same way you would. So it also has a help command, which we can type in there, and that will give us this thing. So a little bit about Rhai in specific. It has this idea of modules. And with those modules, basically what you're doing is you're defining the set of things within your Rust application that you can access. So that is something that's probably worth showing in the code. So if we go into REPL here, you can see that there's like a main. So this is basically, it's a really simple main script that is going to be the binary. So if I open the cargo for this, or where is it actually defined? Sorry, it's in here. So you can see we've got this binary, which is ops REPL, which is what we ran up here inside the container. So it calls to this main function, and this main function is what does our setup. So it's setting up a database URL, sets up the services that we need, and then it basically down here, it does. So this is the DSL that's part of the rhai-console crate. So basically you're able to register these modules. These modules are all defined in here. So you define these modules yourself. Basically there is sort of an abstraction layer that I've given here that makes it a little bit easier to define the modules, but pretty much what you need to do is you need to have your service that you pass in, and you need to call this registration macro and give it some information, and then give it the actual lambda function that it's going to execute, which is the piece of the Rust code that you're actually executing. Everything else is just wrappers that allow you to define what the parameters are, what it's going to accept. So you see you have one here that is going to basically give me my recent orders, and it accepts an I64 parameter n, and then that is what you can see in here. You'll see this here. So orders recent n I64. One nice thing, this available modules is actually auto-generated. So from these registrations, there is a macro that generates that for you, so you don't have to do that. So it'll give you the whole list of everything that you have registered that's available in the console, which is quite nice. Previously, I had this hard-coded, but I was able to do some work in here to make it so that it's auto-registered, which is pretty cool. Yeah, okay, so that gives us some stuff. So again, we can run some things in here. You'll notice at the end here, there's this reports summary. So let's just type that in and see what it gives us. Report summary. And that's gone off and run this reporting code. So if I look at what that does, it goes off and it calls to the service and calls this reports summary, which I can go and find. I'm not going to go find it. You can go and inspect that yourself. But basically, it gives you this stuff. So you can see active product count is 3. If I go here, I have my products. So let's create new products and just give it some random data. And then say we have 11 in stock, create that. So that's been created there. It's active. And then if I run that report again, that gets updated to 4. There we go. So this also, it preserves your state as you go to an extent. So you can do things like let's say orders equal orders, and then I have a list part in the DSL, so I can enter that. Doesn't print anything because it's just defined the variable, and then I can go orders, and there I can see my orders, and then if I go like orders 0, they'll give me the first of the orders, which is super useful. So then what I can also do is I could write a script that might need to do some stuff using these kind of composed DSL type components, which was in the available module. So I can show you as well. You can, if I quit this, then I can show you that you can run a script, which I have in here. So create a scripts repo or a scripts folder. This will get automatically picked up by the crate as well. Or does it get automatically picked up by the crate? That's actually something I can't remember now. If I do, or if you have to define where that comes from. I actually don't remember. But anyway, you can write your scripts and you can, so this is purely written in Rhai, and you can see that it will do stuff. You can have loops and you can do all sorts of different things. So let's try and run this report script. So I think I have the command for it here. Yeah, so I have this same kind of thing. You do an exec. I pass in the binary. Oh yeah. So you pass in the binary and then you pass in a script. So the binary accepts a parameter for the name of the script, which is in here, and then that'll just run the script. So let's go, let's do this report one. Just copy that, paste it in there. And there you go. And that gives you the output of what that script, the output of that script will get printed out to your terminal here. Not super clean, could do with being improved, the script running, but you know, it's pretty basic so far. So yeah, that's kind of it really. That's all I wanted to show. I just wanted to show this thing, talk about my thinking around how this works and why I think this is a useful thing to have. There's a lot of limitations so far still. Like Rhai itself has some limitations, especially based around handling like async code, and some other kind of bits and pieces. Also, the registration process is a little bit cumbersome. I've tried to do some things to make it better. This macro helps with making it better, so that kind of simplifies registration, removes some of the cruft around it. There's also a certain amount of this that it's not fully configurable in all ways. I've kind of come at this with a fairly opinionated lens about what would be useful and how you can piece things together. So it's not necessarily the most flexible thing in the world. It could be made more flexible with further developments, but I didn't want to over-index too much on that for an initial deployment. So yeah, if you like this, and if you've managed to stay this long and listen to this whole thing and you think this is a useful thing and you think this is interesting, I'd love you to use it. I'd love you to install this into an app that you're running and use it and tell me all the bad things. Break it in every way you can and tell me why it's broken and how we can make it better. If it doesn't do something that you'd love it to do, tell me and maybe we'll make it do it. I have used this on a small toy app that I run. Toy app, it does run in production, but it doesn't have a ton of stuff that I need to do. So it's kind of just sitting there and I can do stuff with it, but it's nothing really super important. If you have some stuff like that you'd love to try it with, please let me know. I'd love the feedback and I'd love to make this better because I think this is something that's pretty useful and I think it's kind of a niche thing that doesn't exist and maybe should exist. So let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to leave it there for this video. So as always, thank you guys for watching. If you liked, please share, subscribe, hit the like button, all that good stuff. And as always, folks, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.